Hi, everybody. I'm Carolyn, and this is Elliot Riley, who you might recognize from the lucid dreaming interview that we did. So we've decided to do two videos, actually. This one in which I'm going to interview Elliot about being a type 9 on the Enneagram, and they are going to interview me in a separate video about just typology in general and kind of my journey towards it. And so we'll kind of link the two videos together so you can watch both of them. Should I do a little introduction, Elliot?
Yeah, so I'm also a YouTuber. I have a small channel about lucid dreaming and books, and I sometimes post stand-up comedy on there, but not that often. And I wrote a book about lucid dreaming. Not sure what else to hype, but yeah, more a lucid dreaming book person. But I did recently get into the Enneagram, like maybe a year ago or so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll link all of that. You can buy Elliot's amazing book on lucid dreaming and support them at Patreon, and also really great YouTube channel. Some Bookstagram stuff on there as well as lucid dreaming, which I love your approach to Bookstagram. It's like this subtle, like 9 wit.
Thank you.
We appreciate.
Thanks.
Cool. So, just in case, I don't know if the audience knows, I live in Massachusetts, USA. Elliot is pretty much my neighbor. I mean, we're basically neighbors. And I know I have a lot of people on here from a lot of other places in the United States and the world who may not realize that Massachusetts has been like the epicenter, one of the world epicenters of coronavirus. So I just wanted to name that kind of, what's the word? Elephant in the room? I was going to say ghost in the closet. That's not a thing. And we've been in lockdown for about 4 months now, which I know for myself I mean, I could certainly say a lot of ways in which that channels through my 4-ness as an Enneagram type 4. Before we get into a larger conversation about type 9 in the Enneagram, I'm really curious is there like a 9 approach to lockdown that you've seen, any like interaction there between those?
There's really only one thing I can think of, which is that, of course, like I'm craving connection with other people, but I feel like I can get really in my head about thinking about what everyone else is going through, and it's hard for me to reach out sometimes because I'm like, this is gonna like be a lot for this person if I try to get them to hang out with me and stuff. I don't know, it's just been harder for me to reach out to people, even though it's also more important now because I'm worried about what everyone else is going through and I don't want to be like a burden. And that feels like kind of a 9-ish approach of like overthinking what other people's needs are in the moment and like having a hard time advocating for mine. But that's really the only thing I can think of in a 9 way. But it's been hard.
Yeah.
Like for everybody, yeah.
That piece of like really not, or just backgrounding yourself.
Yeah. And I guess, I mean, it feels kind of 9-ish to feel like, oh, wow, I don't know. I feel like in normal circumstances, if I'm feeling isolated, I would have this tendency to feel like, oh, everyone's probably hanging out without me. And even though I know that's literally not true, that's impossible, it still feels like it's true. It's like an instinct to be like, I'm sure everyone else is. I feel kind of invisible. It's like very hard I don't know how to connect or like how to be seen in this weird time. Yeah.
Well, they say that with type 9, there's kind of this almost erasure of self that a type 9 senses. So I could see that overlaid with like alienation and quarantine is like, do I even exist?
Oh yeah, that's kind of the feeling lately. It's not, it's like weirder than loneliness because there's loneliness, but it's like, yeah, am I even here? There's no one to see me. Like,
my friend who's a major 4 uses this term cosmic orphan that I find really useful, of just like I'm floating in the cosmos completely untethered, and am I real? And so, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious in a larger sense about your sort of relationship to type 9, your journey and why that type construct speaks to you so much. What is it about type 9 that you relate to?
I guess I had kind of the classic experience of like trying to type myself, and as a type 9, like I read through all the types and I felt like I was all of them except for 8 because they're pretty like, what's the word, assertive. But I definitely had that classic, you hear that a lot, of just like I thought I was all of them, and then I got to 9 and was like, okay, actually, yeah, that one makes the most sense. I'm not sure what is most like important to me, but the things that I've learned, I think the most from being a type 9 have to do with like mostly my relationship to anger, because I think all negative emotions are like very hard for a type 9, but I feel like anger in particular is hard because if there's anger, there's probably some kind of conflict going on. And yeah, I was definitely the kind of person for a long time who would say like, oh, I just don't really get angry. I think I said that up to like discovering the Enneagram and being like, that doesn't even make sense. Like, of course there are people who feel really angry and people who are pretty easygoing, but like we all experience all emotions. Like there's no emotion that you just don't feel, right? So yeah, learning that, I feel like I actually try pretty often to like literally just asking myself if I'm angry about anything, because it can be like really hard to know. Or I feel like I do some projecting type of stuff. Like if I'm asking myself if someone's mad at me, then maybe that's probably a clue that I'm mad at them, kind of a thing. So that's probably the most like helpful thing I've learned. And also just like that not everything that feels like conflict even is conflict, because I feel like there are a lot of interactions that just feel very charged and like hard for me, that really aren't conflict exactly. It's just like anything remotely difficult feels like conflict, I guess. I don't know. Yeah.
I love what you said about asking yourself if you're angry about things. I think people take for granted that type 9 is in what we call the anger triad in the Enneagram. So like
yeah.
8, 9, and 1. Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense to me. I actually, to bring it to like dream stuff, I mean, I find that, well, dreams are really emotional for everybody, but I feel like I have a lot of dreams about being really angry. And I'm like, that's really weird because I feel like I never feel anger. And then I go to sleep and I'm like screaming at people. So like, what is the disconnect going on here? I really would love to know if other type 9s have like anger seep into other areas. Or, oh, that's another coronavirus thing I forgot to mention is like, I mean, I felt really angry. I feel like it's an easy version of anger to feel like political anger because it's not at like a specific person in your own like orbit. So that's a way that I can feel anger that doesn't feel like threatening. And I have been really angry this whole time.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing about type 9 and anger is, 8, type 8 embodies anger fully in some ways and seems to have a very conscious experience of it. Type 1 is scared of their anger, but they channel it into basically moral projections.
Yeah.
But type 9 is like, type 9 feels anger and stuffs it. And obviously that becomes classic pressure cooker system. My friend and I call it 9 rage, playfully.
Yeah. And I guess that makes sense. It's like, I have trouble telling, like I said, if it's where the anger is, I'm like, is this person mad at me? Oh, actually, I'm probably mad at them. But it can go the other way, where if someone, it's hard for me to be around people who express anger very very noticeably, because it feels like, even if it's not at me, it feels like it's at me. It feels like I have a hard time knowing like where it is and where it's directed, I guess.
Well, you're also an INFJ, which is maybe a topic for another time, but that's like a kind of double whammy when it comes to the sponging and like tenuous self-other boundary. For a type 9 INFJ is actually quite a common.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
Yeah. But do you feel, because I talk to a lot of type 9s who have a sense of, I don't know, dissociation or just numbing, or some kind of, I mean, in the Enneagram, they call it psychospiritual inertia, which I think is an amazing phrase. But I don't know if you relate to that at all. Like, just kind of like when you're going over the cliff, just like.
Yeah, I think I do that. I was thinking about this in preparation for this video. Like, the healthy thing to do is like to assert a boundary before I get to that point. And I feel like for a long time I wouldn't do that. So like an example for me, which again kind of ties to being, at least to being an introvert, is like people kind of asking for too much of my energy. So like if we're just like, I'm in a social situation and people want to hang out for too long or something, I feel like I get to a point where I'm exhausted, and my reaction to that is almost like this, like if I'm in an unhealthy place, it's like a passive aggressive, like it's like I'm deciding to like stop giving you access to me. It's like you don't get access to me anymore. Like I'm done with you. And it's not like the silent treatment and just like I'm not participating anymore. And I realized that I also think that can be like a self-esteem thing for 9s of like, gotta realize that like that sucks, that people want you access to you, or they wouldn't have like invited you to spend time with them or whatever. Or like, how would you feel if other people just kind of like shut down like that? I definitely do that if I'm like out of energy, I guess.
That is such an interesting way. I've never heard that described exactly in that way before, but I can tell you as somebody who's not a 9, but who's had tons of 9s in my life, and also I work with a lot of 9s, like through consulting, they've all described that kind of thing, and I can feel it like a lot. That's one of those things about type 9s that other people can feel and that they can't always name. But it's like, where did you go? Like, are you in there? And it can actually be a little scary, to be honest with you. Like that's something that type 9s, it's like such a benign thing on the one hand, but it can, like, say you have a parent who is a type 9 or a partner, it can be like, whoa, like where did they go? I mean, maybe it could be called like the type 9 door.
Yeah, just a retreat.
Yeah.
And yeah, I know you've talked about like feedback loops with 9 and 4s, but I feel like in general, if I'm in that space and I'm thinking of someone in my life who is also a type 9, who I think will like see it sooner than other people, and his reaction will be to like, this is not my boyfriend, we're gonna talk about that later. Another type 9, just to be clear, will like see that in me and like start asking me questions and try to draw me back out, and I hate it. It like, it's the last thing I want. I just kind of want to be left alone at that point. But it becomes, I do think that's another feedback loop opportunity when someone notices that and they're like, oh, come on, come back. And I'm like, no.
Well, because another thing a lot of type 9s, self-aware type 9s have described to me that relates to that is like the horror of being seen. Because when you're seen, you're a self. And like type 9's whole thing is like refusal to engage in the selfing process and like one foot in another world, in a sense, like not fully born as a self. And so then when type 9 is seen or like gently called on something, or even cared for in some ways, I think, it's like you're suddenly a real self. And like, I can imagine that must feel threatening.
Yeah, there's something weird about it. It feels like an unreasonable thing to be annoyed about, but this was really bad when I was like a teenager, because teenagers are so self-conscious about everything already. But I feel like anytime someone would say like, oh, you're being so this, or like that's so you're so like this, whatever, I would just like freeze up and be like, I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to define me at all, which feels unfair because it's like everyone has a personality and people are going to notice that. But I really, especially when I was like younger and less like mentally healthy, I really hated feeling like people were like defining or noticing things.
I don't think it's unfair. I think it makes total sense, like given the 9 personality structure of just like, I'm only a little bit here, don't test me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is like a, a really, really painful state. Ultimately, like with all the Enneagram types are, all of those neuroses of the 9 types are an incredibly painful defended state. And I just think that with type 9s, it can be easy to forget that that's actually a way of suffering. Like it's not obvious because it's like you're taking yourself out. It's like a negative suffering or something like that. But yeah, it's really interesting. So what do you think, like, you can answer this however you want in as much or little detail as you want. But if you think of like what your worst self versus your best self as a 9 could be, how would you describe those potential extremes?
So I do like that phrase 9 rage a lot. I feel like it really works. And I feel the very few people who have like seen me like that would know what you mean. I feel like that's me at my worst, and that has only happened. I've only had like the extreme bottle up, explode moments like a handful of times, probably ever. But that's like very scary for the other people, but it's scary for me too. I haven't had like anything like that happen in a couple of years, but yeah, I don't know. I mean,
I know some 9s that I talk to talk about it as like a kind of edgy passive aggressiveness too. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be rage. And I've seen that in 9s. I've never seen you really do that, but I didn't know if that was something you related to or not.
Yeah, I think the passive aggressive edginess would come through in that like shutting down way, which I'm trying to get better at by just like I said, asserting a boundary before it gets to that point. But yeah, I've had a few moments of like really, actually I remember a phrase that you used in one of your videos where you called it like a sudden assertion of needs. And I felt like that I really related to that, because it's like, it feels like if you've been shutting down your own needs for so long, however many weeks, months, whatever, in a relationship, and then you're like ready for whatever reason, or you're just done doing that, it's just very self-righteous, like, okay, I'm ready to, we're gonna do me now. We're gonna do me stuff now. Like, I've been helping you, but the other person doesn't see it that way, or just has no idea that all this stuff is going on in your head. And so it's like, yeah, I think the healthier version of me is someone who will just recognize needs and boundaries and like my own feelings right away, and say something about it, and not decide like, oh, I'm upset, I should go take like several weeks to ruminate before I do anything. Like, it's not actually helpful.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I feel like not like a type 9 at our best, I would feel like would be like using that empathetic skill of knowing what the group wants, like for good or to like a positive end, but also recognizing that it's not always the right thing for the group for you to just not tell them what you want. That's not helpful a lot of the time. Or like, how would I feel if I was surrounded by a bunch of 9s? I feel like I would be miserable if everyone was like waffling and not making decisions. Like,
yeah. That's it. Like I know some very unhealthy 9s, and I know some really healthy ones. And I include you and your partner, who is a 9, who I'm going to ask you about in a minute, in that. And the healthier ones I know, there's a reason why they sometimes call it the peacemaker. Like, they do actually develop a real intelligence around social dynamics. And part of that is realizing that you are a part of the social ecosystem. And that, like, really, not in this Oprah, like, self-love way, in like a very literal way, like, you need to be a full self, because that is the responsible thing to do for other people. And like, the self-fulfilling prophecy of a 9 is that you want to avoid conflict so much that it creates conflict in the long game. And so the healthy 9s I know, it's exactly what you're saying. It's like, how can I know myself enough to become a real healthy self with reasonable needs and say them, but But healthy nines like truly are these like peacemaker, mediator personalities, and it's where you feel like other people, like me as a 4, where I just have such a deeply ingrained like self-consciousness around being weird and being the intense black horse, dark horse, whatever they call it. A healthy 9 holds space for that in like such a legitimately non-judgmental, non-threatened way, and it's really like a valuable trait.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I feel like I have a lot of 4 friends, and it feels like it's nice to be around someone who's gonna like, I don't know, open up. Because,
well, the 9 dynamic can be really cool when it's healthy, and I mean, I won't get into that. We've talked about that before, but you know, I am going to segue here into what I am fascinated by.
Yeah.
Which I think my viewers are also going to be fascinated by this.
Yeah.
So Elliot's partner is, oh, by the way, we forgot to cheers.
Oh, yeah, we're both drinking wine. Cheers.
Quarantine, baby.
Yeah.
Elliot's lovely, amazing partner is also a 9. And as an Enneagram nerd, I have been watching this relationship since the beginning, just fascinated. Because I don't think I've actually seen a 9-9 relationship up close ever. I've seen a lot of 9s together. Like my family are 75% 9s. So it's not like I've never seen them in the same room. But an actual relationship, like where you guys seem really healthy and great, I feel like as a 4, I'm just like, this is so different from how I am in relationships. And I feel like, what's her name? Diane Fossey. I feel like I'm like an anthropologist, like watching 2 intimate 9s in the wild, like being like, how does this work?
Yeah.
I mean, can you speak to any of that? Like, what is it like to be in a 9-9 relationship?
Well, I think one thing that's important to know is that I have like roped him into getting, and he's pretty into the Enneagram at this point. He's like interested. And so we will joke about it a lot. Well, like it comes up where he'll be like, just 2 9s trying to pick a movie. Like it'll be an hour. It'll be a while. Like small decisions are hard. But I feel like I don't know. I have more trouble with decision making than he does. I've told you this anecdote before, but I feel like it's really interesting, where we were just trying to decide on like a bar to go to, like the lowest stakes decision ever. And I was like, I know this is just hard for me. I hate making decisions. And he asked me if I wanted him to just decide for us, or if I wanted him to like help me make decisions more. Which is funny, because then in that moment I was like, okay, but you just asked me a really hard question to answer. Now I have to think about that. That's a really hard decision. But I feel like there's a recognition that like deciding something is like a form of labor for probably both of us, and like just negotiating that, or just like it's okay to take turns. If there are people out there in like a 9-9 relationship, like if it's something small, it doesn't matter. You could literally just like take turns or something.
I love that advice.
Like, I don't know, because for me especially, sometimes I feel like we have an understanding where I could just be like, yeah, right now I just want you to choose. Like I just don't want to choose. But I also appreciate him. Like that's a negotiable thing. Yeah, we do a lot of checking in. I'm not sure.
Because I think a lot of 9s don't. I would suspect that there are a lot of 9-9 relationships where there's no movement and there's no forward movement, or that the connection might not be super, super strong or passionate because of the inherent nature of the 9 protector.
Yeah.
But you guys don't seem like that.
No, I don't think so. We're probably in more of like a rhythm than most people would be after like a little over a year. Maybe that's some like 9 stuff. We're just introverts. We're both introverts too. So it's very just like, we just do what we do. It's not a lot of variation. Although also we're in lockdown now. So like we don't do anything. But another thing that really helped was like, so it's been a little over a year, and I think I'm a little scared in the sense that like we've never had a big fight. We've never really had any fights. And I'm like, there's part of me that's like, are we both just doing that thing where we don't say? So I just do a lot of checking in, asking a lot of questions, and then asking myself a lot of questions of like, is anything bothering me? Is there anything that I'm like ignoring of my own like needs? But we did have one like not quite fight, but like serious, I was upset kind of conversation. And I was like not really, I was closing down a little bit, and he told me like, remember he just said, it's okay to be mad at me, like you can be mad at me. And I was like, no, I can't. But it was so helpful.
Sure, for a 9 to say that.
Yeah, but it was very, very helpful for me, because that's like the scariest thing. I feel like when I feel anger, or again, whichever direction it's going in an important relationship, it just feels like the whole relationship is like threatened. Oh, and we also had a conversation early on about, which I brought up, just about like conflict styles, basically, where I told him that which this seems like beyond Enneagram. I feel like this is a case where like most people would probably fall into one camp or the other, as far as like, if you're in a fight, do you want to like walk it off and cool down, or do you not want that? Because it's one or the other, right? I feel like for most people. And I brought that up and told him that like, that is really, really hard for me when somebody wants to leave during a serious conversation. And luckily he was just like, oh, me too. I hate that too. But I feel like any couple could probably like get ahead of that and set some boundaries around that, because that's really hard to be. I've been in relationships with someone who needs to go cool off in a fight, and that's I realize now that I could have definitely asked for a lot of stuff around that. At the very least, like, you tell me when you're coming back or something. But
well, and I
don't know.
I have opinions about that. Like,
yeah.
I won't get into it, but I do not agree with the idea that it is like always the rule that people should take time out. Like, anyone who
it's weird.
Yeah, attachment theory, it's just like, that's like only for people who are securely attached, which is not like that much of the population. We need to find another creative way to.
Yeah. I just think it's weird how much, I feel like I've seen a lot of therapists just universally recommend that, like for everyone. Like everyone should always take a break when they're heated, and I'm like, I can't. It's not good.
I think there are other ways that can be handled. And I know, as somebody with like pretty serious insecure attachment, which is a lot of people, it's like 30% of the population or something, that's just going to make everything worse in the moment and the long run. So in any case, I think that things you're saying, like, I think they're going to be really meaningful to a lot of my viewers who I talk, like a lot of 9s contact me. And you're saying so many wise things about you're introspective in a way that I think can be hard sometimes for a 9 to get there, or there can be specific blocks to introspection because it involves going into the darkness and like potentially needing to become really aware and assertive of needs and like all of these core struggles. And so some of the things you've said have just been, maybe this wasn't on purpose, but I think they're like really cool pieces of advice for 9 are looking to grow. And I guess I just have one last general question, which is like, what are some ways that the loved ones of 9s can support them, not enable them, but support their growth? And what are some ways that 9s can help themselves?
I feel like for loved ones of 9s, okay, so I'm gonna make a recommendation that's not actually easy, but makes sense to me. And I think of it in like a consent context, but I don't mean just like sexually, but like it's similar in the sense that like I think what you need a lot of the time is not the absence of a no, right? It's like an enthusiastic yes for things that are important, you know, in decision making or even like small decision making. I think it can be helpful to explicitly ask, because I feel like there are a lot of times in my life where I have felt like steamrolled or just kind of swept up in like a group dynamic where I know that the other people were probably not thinking that they thought, you would have said something if you didn't want to do that, right? But it's so hard. And so I feel like just explicitly asking can be helpful. Although I will also say, I feel like that is probably going to be like a thankless task for the friend, because depends. But sometimes it's really uncomfortable if someone explicitly asks me like, well, what do you want? And I'm like, great, now you're making me think about it. I hate doing this, but
you know what? Friends and loved ones help each other. Like, I don't think that it has to be, whatever word you want to use for codependence or unhealthy dynamic. I mean, I think that people need to be able to say, hey, if you did XYZ, it would just be really helpful for me. Like, and on the other side of it, here's what I'll do. My friend who's in a 4-9 relationship, she has learned like that just, as an act of love, one thing she can do is ask her partner, what does he want? And it's really, they've come up with this code of she'll be like, was that a 9 yes or a real yes?
Yeah.
Is that a 9 no or a real no? And it's kind of this like funny code they have that they've worked out. And I think it's just such a cool way to come up with little things like that.
Yeah, that kind of takes the pressure off. I feel like it's hard for people to understand that, like, sometimes I really don't know what I want, or that like taking everyone else into account is like, it's just part of figuring out what I want. It's like, I need to know what everybody else wants to know what I want, which is
a beautiful
tricky.
quality.
Yeah.
Like, imagine if all people had that quality. Like, I mean, we don't live in a world that supports that quality, but I just think that's something about 9 and INFJ and gender, women being gendered, whatever.
Yeah.
That's actually really cool. It just is also prone to getting squashed.
Yeah. And on that note, I feel like the last thing for this question that I wanted to say was that this goes both for like 9s and their loved ones. Like, if you're a loved one of a 9, like, if that person has asserted a need or a boundary or whatever, it's very possible that was like a long process. And by the time they say it, it's like, I mean it now. They've thought about it. And so it can be really hurtful, like something that really wouldn't be a big deal to someone else, like pushing back on those boundaries sometimes is like really frustrating, because it's like a lot of thought went into this no. Or this boundary. But then on the flip side, like for a 9, it's like, again, not everyone takes all that much time to assert those things, and like they don't see the thought processes. So it's like, but
that's why the Enneagram is so useful, because we learn about each other's what I call reality goggles. And like a lot of 9s tell me that they just like, well, first of all, legitimately needing a lot of time to process, that's legitimate, right? Just so I just want to normalize that. But a lot of 9s tell me the exact same thing, that they've ruminated. Like, the word ruminating is used in some of the Enneagram literature, which I don't think we realize that about 9s. Like, it's one of those things I've gleaned from 9s telling me about their internal life, that like there's actually like that's often very verbal or image-based, just like ruminations and synthesizing different sides of things, and it can look like nothing's going on, but when you get to the point where you're actually like, here's the decision, or like, here's the need, and then someone who doesn't have that process like invalidates it, I can imagine that just must be like crushing or angering.
Yeah, it's just hard because it makes you do that can be really difficult, the assertion part. And so it's asking, and you're being asked to do that like twice or more than twice is very, very hard. It's like, okay, now I'm just tired.
Yeah. And I think it's completely okay for a 9 to ask their close friends and their partners to accommodate for that. My like flip side is like, I always feel like what goes along with that is the person agreeing to do their own work as well, right? So like, what would you say would be the best way that a 9 can help themselves?
I'm just trying to think of how to word all these. There's just a lot of things. I mean, I think that asking yourself if you're angry thing, is helpful for me, because it's like, you really might not know. And if you, and just not waiting. I mean, I don't know if you can, it's too easy to say like, don't do the ruminating part, but like, I feel like if you just can get in tune with like your gut reactions of what you want and like assert it sooner rather than later, I feel like that's my probably biggest like 9 problems that I've had over the years have been like taking so long with a decision that it really, really feels like it's too late. And that is like, it's just too late. So, and that goes both ways. Yeah. Like if you know a 9, like maybe know that a big decision might take longer than for other people, but yeah, don't wait until it's literally then you're already like, just like going along with other people's desires. Cause it's just, you can get really stuck. And
then it's even harder because the whole thing about 9 is that I've often wished that the 9, instead of being called the peacekeeper, would be called the homeostasis keeper, but that doesn't sound as good because that's really what it is. A 9 wants to keep whatever the internal and external homeostasis is. And that might legitimately be like, I want everybody to be happy and peaceful, but like 9s can go along with really bad situations and behaviors, and because that's what's happening. And so to push against that for a 9 is going against the entire personality structure in a way.
Yeah.
That's where the work is.
And I guess the other thing that I forgot, which I've sort of mentioned, is like, yeah, just recognizing that people want to know your needs and your opinions, like that closing off. It doesn't feel like that big of a deal in the moment. And even like you said, like, it doesn't feel, it's kind of subtle, but it's like you're cutting people off access to you and they want that, you know. I think about like other people in my life, and if they did that, and I would just be like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, I wish like all people could see themselves from the outside, because from the outside, for me, I value 9s so much as an intense person. I value what 9s have to offer so much, and it actually really pains me to see 9s suffer in this particular way. Like, it's actually really hard for the loved one of a 9 to kind of know that these things are happening, and the 9 gets to the place where they are kind of inaccessible. They close that door, and it's like, it's kind of heartbreaking, you know, when I can get some, I mean, sometimes it's maddening if a person's hurt by it, but it's also just like, oh my gosh, are you okay? Like, I want you to get what you want. Like, come on, come out. Like,
yeah.
So yeah. So interesting. Is there anything else that you wanted to, any bits of 9 wisdom?
I had notes. I'm looking at them to see if I remember anything. Yeah, no, just that like what you want matters. That's the thing. That's the I don't know, the refrain, I guess, for 9s. That's it.
You get that tattooed, like what you want matters.
Yeah, totally.
That's awesome. Well, this has been really cool. We're going to do a second video where we do a little switcheroo. So we'll share the links. And again, you guys, Elliot Riley, YouTuber, lucid dreaming expert, booktuber, type 9. And please check out my notes below, because you can buy her amazing book on lucid dreaming and support her on Patreon and all that kind of awesome stuff. So, Elliot,
cheers.
In your yard soon from 10 feet away. All right, bye.